Winds howl across their sharp edges. Snow buries them in silence for months at a time. Lightning tears across the sky above them as if the universe itself were testing their patience. And yet the mountains never resist. They do not shout at the storm. They do not argue with the wind. They simply remain. Calm, unmoved, present. Now, here is the curious thing about human life. Most of us grow up believing strength is something loud. We imagine it looks like trophies, applause, victory speeches, and shining moments that everyone can see. We believe strength must announce itself to the world. But if you look closely at life, really look, you begin to notice something very different. Real strength is often invisible. It does not stand on a stage. It does not demand attention. Sometimes it looks like something far quieter. Sometimes it looks like a boy, walking alone, refusing to give up. Let me tell you a story. Not just a story about effort. Not just a story about determination. But a story about the strange way life shapes those who continue walking when everyone else has stopped. And as you listen, you may begin to realize this story is not only about a boy. It may be about you. Imagine a small village resting between dry hills and long, dusty roads. The kind of place where mornings begin with the sound of wind brushing through empty fields, where the sun rises slowly, painting the land in soft gold before the heat of the day arrives. The village was simple. A few houses made of old bricks, narrow paths between them, children running across the dirt with laughter that echoed through the quiet air. But in this village lived a boy who seemed different. Not different in a way that people admired. Different in a way that made people doubt him. Different in a way that made people doubt him. He was not the fastest. He was not the fastest. He was not the smartest in class. He was not the child teachers pointed to and said, "Watch him. He will become something great." In fact, many people quietly assumed the opposite. They saw a boy who struggled, a boy who took longer to understand things, a boy who sometimes stared out the classroom window while others quickly answered questions. And, if we are honest, life often begins like this for many of us. We are born into circumstances we did not choose, into families with their own struggles, into environments that shape the way people see us, into stories already written in the minds of others. Sometimes those stories are small. Sometimes they whisper things like, "This is your place. This is your limit. This is how far someone like you can go." And slowly, without realizing it, many people begin to believe those whispers. But here is the strange illusion of the human mind. We believe our starting point defines our destination. We assume the beginning tells us everything about the ending. Yet nature tells a very different story. Have you ever watched a river being born? High in the mountains, where cold air moves through silent valleys, a river begins as something almost invisible, just a tiny stream, barely strong enough to move the small stones beneath it. If you saw it in that moment, you might laugh. You might say, this little stream could never change anything. But that same fragile stream flows day after day, drop after drop, year after year, and eventually it carves deep valleys through solid rock, not through force, not through sudden power, but through patience. The boy in our story was very much like that river. Every morning he woke before the sun had fully risen. The air outside was cool and quiet. Birds perched on wires above the narrow road, and the world seemed to hold its breath before the day began. And every morning, the boy walked. The road to his school stretched far beyond the village, a long path that climbed slowly up dusty hills, small stones scattered across it, dry wind brushing the ground. Sometimes the sun beating down so strongly it felt like the earth itself was testing his will. Other children traveled this road too, but many of them had bicycles. Some rode together, laughing loudly as they passed him. Sometimes they teased him. "Why do you walk so slowly? Do you think you'll ever catch up?" The boy rarely answered. He simply kept walking. One step, then another. Inside the classroom, things were not much easier. Lessons moved quickly. Numbers danced across the board. Words filled pages faster than his mind could follow. Teachers sometimes sighed. Classmates sometimes laughed, and slowly, quietly, the familiar shadow of doubt began to appear. Have you ever noticed how doubt feels? It rarely shouts, it whispers. Soft thoughts that slip into the mind like fog creeping across a valley. Maybe this isn't for you. Maybe you're not meant for more. Maybe life already decided your place. These thoughts visit almost everyone at some point. And for many people, this is where the journey ends. They stop trying. They stop walking. Because the human mind prefers certainty, even if that certainty is small. But the boy did something unusual. He kept walking. Not with dramatic determination, not with some heroic speech inside his mind. Just quietly, one step, and then another. Have you ever walked through thick morning fog? The kind of fog that covers the road so deeply you cannot see very far ahead. At first, it feels unsettling. You wonder what lies beyond the white mist. You question whether the path is even still there. But if you continue walking, something interesting happens. The road slowly reveals itself. Not all at once, just a few steps at a time. And life works in much the same way. Most people want clarity before movement. They want to see the entire path before they take the first step. But the universe does not work like that. The path reveals itself only after you begin walking. The boy did not know where his effort would lead. He did not know if anyone would ever believe in him. He did not know if his long walks would change anything at all. But he understood one simple truth. If he stopped, nothing would ever change. So he continued, day after day, week after week, month after month. And slowly, something invisible began to happen. Something no one else could see. Imagine a seed buried deep beneath the soil. From the outside, it looks lifeless, covered in darkness, pressed beneath the weight of the earth. But inside that seed, something extraordinary is happening. Pressure is transforming it. The shell begins to crack. A tiny root pushes downward into the unseen world, and a fragile shoot begins reaching upward toward the light. To an outside observer, nothing seems to be happening. But beneath the surface, life is preparing itself. The boy was experiencing something very similar. Each failure taught him patience. Each mistake forced him to look again. Each difficult day strengthened a quiet resilience growing inside him. But here is where most people misunderstand life. They believe success belongs to those who begin with talent, to those who move quickly, to those who shine brightly from the very beginning. Yet if you look at nature, you will notice something different. The ocean is not powerful because of one giant wave. It is powerful because of endless waves, small waves, quiet waves, waves that rise and fall without anyone applauding them. And together, over time, they shape the shoreline of the entire planet. The boy failed many times. Tests that returned with disappointing marks. Competitions where others seemed to move ahead easily. Dreams that appeared just within reach, yet somehow remained distant. People around him began saying something very familiar. Maybe you should be realistic. You have probably heard those words before. They are often spoken with good intentions. But if you listen closely, they carry a hidden message. They are really saying, stop walking. Let the mountain remain unclimbed. But something inside the boy refused to believe that life had already finished writing his story. Not because he was confident, not because he was curious. And curiosity is a very powerful force. Curiosity asks questions where fear sees walls. Curiosity wonders what might happen if you take just one more step. And so the boy continued. Step by step, day by day, year by year, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, something remarkable began to change, not just his circumstances, but his mind. Because persistence is not only about reaching a destination. Persistence transforms the person who walks the path. The boy who once doubted himself slowly became someone who understood struggle. Someone who had faced the quiet disappointment of failure and survived. Someone who had walked through enough fog to realize something surprising. The fog was never the enemy. The fog was the teacher. It forced him to trust the next step instead of the distant horizon. It forced him to grow stronger inside. But the most profound realization of his journey had not yet appeared. Because the real secret of perseverance is deeper than effort. It is deeper than determination. The sky stretches endlessly above you. The horizon blurs where the sea meets the light. Waves rise from the deep, travel across the surface, and dissolve quietly on the shore. One wave follows another. Some are small. Some are powerful. Some arrive gently, barely touching the sand. Others crash with thunder and foam. But none of them stay. Each wave rises and falls, and then another appears. Life moves in a rhythm very much like this. Yet the human mind does something very peculiar. It freezes moments in place. A single failure happens, and we believe it defines our entire story. A rejection appears, and we assume it means the road has ended. A mistake occurs, and suddenly, the mind begins building a wall around that moment. But look again at the ocean. Does a single wave determine the ocean? Of course not. One wave disappearing does not mean the sea has failed. Another always follows. And yet, many people allow one moment in life to become their identity. I failed once. I wasn't good enough. I tried and it didn't work. These thoughts quietly settle into the mind like fog settling over a valley. Slowly, they grow thicker until the person can no longer see beyond them. The boy in our story began to notice something important about this. Each time he failed, he was still there. The sun still rose the next morning. The road still stretched ahead of him. The opportunity to take another step still existed. Failure, he realized, did not erase him. It only tested him. Each difficult day carried a strange hidden gift. When the road felt steep, his legs grew stronger. When the lessons felt confusing, his mind learned patience. When people doubted him, he discovered a quiet independence inside himself. And slowly, like the slow turning of seasons, a realization began forming in his mind. Perhaps perseverance was not really about winning. Perhaps perseverance was about becoming someone who cannot be easily broken. Think of a tree growing on a windy mountain. The wind never stops there. Storms arrive again and again, bending the branches, shaking the leaves, testing the strength of the trunk. But those same storms force the tree to send its roots deeper into the earth. Without the wind, the roots would remain shallow. Without the storms, the tree would never become strong enough to survive the mountain. The boy began to see his life in the same way. The obstacles he once feared were shaping him. The difficulty was not an enemy. It was training. Now here is the strange paradox of human life. The very experiences we try hardest to avoid are often the ones that build our strength. We want comfort. We want certainty. We want smooth roads and easy victories. But life, in its mysterious wisdom, often gives us something else. It gives us hills to climb. It gives us fog that hides the road. It gives us moments when we must continue walking, even when we cannot see the destination. Most people misunderstand this completely. They believe persistence means fighting reality, forcing outcomes, struggling against the current, like someone trying to swim upstream in a powerful river. But true persistence is something much quieter than that. It is more like walking with the river, allowing the current to guide you while still moving forward. The boy eventually stopped asking a question that had once troubled him. He stopped asking, "Why is this happening to me?" Instead, he began asking something very different. What is this trying to teach me? That small change in perspective transformed everything. Because the moment life becomes a teacher, every experience becomes valuable. Failure becomes information. Difficulty becomes practice. Pain becomes direction. Years passed quietly, almost unnoticed, The boy continued walking the same dusty roads, but something inside him had changed. The boy who once doubted himself had become someone who understood effort, someone who understood patience, someone who had learned how to continue when continuing felt difficult. And slowly, something interesting began to happen. The things that once seemed impossible began to feel manageable. The lessons that once confused him began to make sense. The road that once felt endless began to feel familiar. People around him began to notice the change. They saw someone who was calm in difficult moments, someone who did not panic when problems appeared, someone who kept moving forward when others became discouraged. Eventually, people began asking him a question. How did you succeed? They expected a complicated answer. Perhaps a secret technique. Perhaps a special talent. Perhaps some hidden advantage. But the boy would simply smile. And he would say something surprisingly simple. I didn't quit. At first, this answer seemed almost too simple. But when you think about it deeply, you begin to see the truth hidden inside those words. Most people do not fail because they lack intelligence. Most people do not fail because they lack ability. Most people fail because they stop walking too soon. They stop when the first storm arrives. They stop when the fog hides the road. They stop when the mountain looks too tall. But the boy had discovered something life-changing. Mountains are climbed one step at a time. Rivers carve valleys one drop at a time. And human transformation happens in exactly the same way. Quietly, slowly, almost invisibly in the beginning, but unstoppable in the end. Now, let me ask you something. What road have you stopped walking? What dream did you quietly place aside because it seemed too difficult? What mountain did you decide was simply too high? Because here is the deeper truth hidden inside this story. The boy was never extraordinary. He did not possess magical talent. He did not possess magical talent. He did not begin life with special advantages. He simply continued long enough to discover something most people never see. Life is not testing your talent. Life is revealing your depth. And depth is only discovered by those who keep walking. Those who stay with the process long enough to see what lies beyond the fog. So perhaps the real lesson of this story is not about success at all. Perhaps it is about trust. Trusting that each small step matters. Trusting that growth is happening even when it feels invisible. Trusting that the road, no matter how uncertain, is still leading somewhere meaningful, because the universe has a quiet pattern. It rewards those who remain present on the path, not those who rush, not those who chase applause, but those who continue. Step by step, day after day, like a river that never questions whether it will reach the ocean. And perhaps tonight, as you sit here reflecting on this story, you may begin to see something beautiful about your own life. Your journey is not behind schedule. Your path is not broken. Your mountain is not impossible. You are simply sunned, ill walking. And that quiet act of continuing, of taking one more step, even when the road is unclear, may be the most powerful thing a human being can do. Because every great story, every meaningful life, every transformation that ever shaped the world began exactly this way, with someone who refused to stop walking.